Here we go. GM, everybody. Welcome back to another banger show with Somnia. So, look, I'm really excited for this. Paul, it feels like it's been a little while, but I feel like there's only been a week gap. Is that right?
I don't know. Has it been 2 weeks or a week?
It was,
I'm not sure. We were supposed to do it
maybe it
last
was
week and I
two.
wasn't
Maybe.
well.
And the
I
week
think it might be.
before was I in Dubai?
Yeah. But didn't we do it then and we did the
Yeah.
AI one? I think we did 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Yeah, this is wild now, dude. It's so funny how quickly
Dude, time is mental.
conversations. Yeah, like it feels like we've known each other for a while already, and it's only been what, like 6-7 weeks that we've been running these now.
Yeah.
So yeah, especially when it's like just a week off, and it feels like, oh, I haven't seen Paul in a week. I sort of miss you. Like I like
But,
these
but
shows, it's crazy.
I think it's just Web3 though. Like literally a week, like so many things happen in a week is mental. It's just space, I think.
Definitely, definitely. There's been some chaos. I don't know how much of this you actually see on the timeline, which might be a positive, by the way, but there's been a lot of drama this week on the timeline. So we had like two big events in like the more niche content influencer space as opposed to like the builder space. So we had one event which was a very prominent figure, Frank D Gods from the D Gods
Yeah.
team. I don't know if you're aware of the
Yeah,
NFT
yeah,
project.
yeah.
Yeah, like, it's fairly big. He stepped down.
Yeah.
So he basically just messaged everybody on X and announced, "Oh, I'm stepping down. Can't do this anymore. Yada yada for whatever reason." And then yesterday we had a prominent influencer launch a token, and then it just immediately dumped for
Oof.
no apparent reason. Like this is, by the way, this isn't like an influencer you would expect this from. Like this is someone with like a little bit more reputation. The only reason I don't share names on that side is because it's still unraveling. It sort of happened
Yeah.
yesterday, and they're saying, look, there's more context to this. Seems a bit like, how much more context can there be? You launched a token and then on the transaction side, we can see you dumped that token. It was for point 0.4 ETH though. So
Big money.
like this
That's
is
worth ruining your whole
big.
reputation for that point for ETH.
Exactly. Just literally, that's what people are like. Okay, I'm a little confused because this guy is like definitely, he's at the point where he's 100% monetized, like no doubt about it. Working with some of the biggest brands in the space, like the most reputable brands in the space. But it was an experiment. So these are sort of the two big things that had like.
Yeah. This is one of the issues though. Like, you guys must have seen Believe, right? And Herman, my co-founder, he released a token with Believe, just to experiment. But loads of people bought it, ran it up to like 2 million market cap, and then went mad at him because he because he basically didn't keep supporting it, and he was just literally experimenting with the app. And I was like, Herman, you really shouldn't have done that. Like, literally, people will come buy the token just because you're like somewhat famous, and then pump it up and cause those problems. But yeah.
That's crazy because I think this one was about 500,000, so that's like a 4x for him in there.
Yeah, I get it though. It is weird, right? When you as a person in the space want to like play around with the new stuff and try it out, but ultimately, if you put your name to it, it gets really dicey really quickly because you look like you're representing that project, and if it then pumps and dumps, you're going to get massive loads of hate. Yeah, I don't know. There was the big one with that launchpad on Solana where all of the influencers got a drop if they created a token. That went pretty mad. I
Oh
saw
yeah,
that.
what
That
was
was
that?
all over. Boop, was it? What's it called?
Yeah, yeah, and also they changed the specifics, right? Like, so
Yeah,
they basically said, look, if you're a creator, this is what's going to happen. If you're going to get X amount of token, you can essentially reference before you launch, this is what you're going to get.
yeah,
And then they rewrote the rules after all of these creators have brought in that attention and said, actually, some of this is going to go to a community. The
yeah.
distribution's completely different. You're not going to get as much from it. Like, wild stuff. So yeah, tokens aren't having a great time of it right now.
Yeah, I mean it's that time again, the bull market time again, where the grift starts happening. All the old classic people have come back, and I'm just like, oh, you're back. Hi again.
Yeah, yeah, I do. There's some other news that is like really dicey right now from big brand builders as well. And you're talking, like 4 years, 5 years of building in the space, and apparently they've done some stuff where it's like, okay, you thought this was a pump. That's the only logical sort of connection I can make to somebody like behaving poorly in the space at this point in like any sort of extractive way or even in like a semi-dicey way. The only reason I think you would put that reputation on the line in any way whatsoever is if you thought like this momentum was just gonna crash and you were just like trying to take advantage of what you thought was a pump, but actually it feels like the market's back, in my opinion. Like it feels like actually this is not going anywhere. Like Bitcoin is just constantly like having a little leg up, and yes, it'll come down, but it's coming down in the hundreds of thousands at this point. You know, it's past that 100K mark at least. So yeah, I don't know why they are behaving this way. It's really interesting that you have that story as well, though, because I'm with you. Like if you have honestly, if you have any sort of following that you know that you have sway with that following, like you're a creator or you're an influencer in a way where people, you know, respond to you every day, they react to you every day, and you can just feel a level of respect
Yeah.
in the responses and like the communication between a community. At that point, you are past experimentation. The same way Apple can't just launch any product at this point. That's not a thing. You can't just be like, and I know they sort of did with the VR. This is sort of a bad example, but like, like realistically though, Apple cannot just be like, oh, you know what? We're just gonna fuck around and find out and launch a new, different phone that's gonna be awful. And then when like thousands upon millions of people buy this thing, we can just say, oh well, you know, it was an experiment. We didn't say it was going to be a great phone. We were just like at a certain point Apple can't do it. And I think as an influencer or a builder, you have to have the same perspective of like, look, you get to a certain level, you're no longer scrappy. Like you can't just
Yeah.
experiment on the chain.
It's so what big brands actually do, they create sub brands and dark brands, where they create new entities with a
Yeah.
whole new set of branding, and then they launch these test products in specific markets to try them out, and then they put them into the main brand when they see them working. You can do the same thing, right? You can have like a different Twitter account, just do it from that. But yeah, you can't do it from your main account. That's like a piece of collateral which will then follow you forever, and yeah, it's not worth it. I
Yeah.
can yeah. I just don't I get it. In a way, I get it because ultimately people want to make money, but it makes me really sad that that's what the technology is used for at the end of the day, for people to build up these followings and then kind of mass extract from them. Yeah, it is part of the space, but it does make me sad.
Well, yeah, and the reason I brought this up as our like cold open, which is sort of what we're having at the moment, before we dive into, you know, for our speakers, like really dive into Web3 standards, which is actually like quite aligned with the conversation we're going to have today, is because Somnia are building for the long term, and quite clearly not in a world where it's an extraction play. And really, the only distinguishing factor I contribute to an extraction play is no fundamental utility at the end of it. I think if there's any business or project that is genuinely building with utility in mind
Yeah,
and very clearly building to that vision, immediately they're not extracting. Like they are trying to find product market fit, and therefore they're trying to provide value to the space. And Somnia are obviously like hugely into that category. What do you ever like see like these huge pumps, these huge moments of just people making a fuck ton of money and think, why am I building an actual product here when people can just, you know, basically hype up something for 6 months to a year and then extract 50 to 100 million from the space?
I think it goes back to what do you care about and what makes you happy. I always do this thought process of like you're sitting on your deathbed and you look back on your life and what would you be proud of, basically at the end of the day. And if I sat there and I got to the end of my life and I was mega rich with like hundreds of millions of dollars, but I'd done that by manipulating people, extracting loads of cash, and then just disappearing off to the sunset, not providing any value to society, it's like, was that really a good life? Did you really help move the world forward in any fashion? That's why I do what I do. Ultimately, I think there's a level, right, where you need to have enough money to survive, and then there's levels where you have to get to that. Once you're there, for me, it's about how can you provide value to society and help people become better in some form or fashion, rather than just extracting max cash. I don't know why people do it. I'm very weirdo in this case. I think a lot of people, their life goals are trying to make more money, whilst mine, I
Mm.
kind of done that bit. Now I'm just like, I want to provide as much value and help as many people as I can. And I find that much more fulfilling at the end of the day. It makes it much easier to live and have a good time. If I wanted money, I'd go work at a hedge fund and make a lot of money over there, but it wouldn't be very fulfilling at the end of the day.
Yeah, I love that take. I love that perspective as well. For me, I'm nowhere near as altruistic or morally like centered to that compass. I just genuinely believe this space isn't going anywhere. And no matter how much money I could extract in like a 6 month, 12 month, a 2 year, 3 year time horizon, it's never gonna add the value to me financially, like purely like no moral reasons, no I'm helping anyone or I'm doing anything. It's just nowhere near gonna add to my standard of life financially and like physically, that if I just keep creating in the space and adding value, like, just the same way there was definitely that YouTuber back in 2003, 2005, whenever it like really started to just have that moment and people were saying to like Tim Ferriss and Joe Rogan, you're too late. You're too late to jump
Yeah.
onto the content creator bandwagon. But zoom out 20 years and the amount of money and value that the people at the top can now access
Yeah.
is beyond anything any single scammer could possibly have extracted in those early years, no matter if they sold boot camps or like downloads or whatever. So that's my take on it, is like, even if you don't resonate with you, Paul, and your moral side, which I'm only half joking. Like, yes, I definitely want to add value and I want to be able to sleep at night. That is nice. But at the same time, like, even if that's not what you're trying to do you not realize that like this is literally the future? Like the blockchain building on it. And if you look at some of these other like industries 20 years ago or even 10 years ago, and the amount of value that you could extract versus if you just try to add value normally for a consistent amount of time and wanted to stay here, like how much more money and how much more value you could obtain by just not dunking and dumping on a bunch of people, where even legally it's a little shaky. Like that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's always, if you invest for the long term in something that has tailwinds and has like an upward trajectory, you will always do better from a value perspective in the end. The issue is human nature, right?
Mm.
Everyone always wants the kind of I want to get rich tomorrow type thing. I literally had my brother text me a few weeks ago being like, Paul, you need to tell me how to get rich. And I'm like, you don't get rich fast, Michael. You have to like slowly build some kind of valuable skill set and then give that back to the world over and over again and build that up over time. That is the way how you get rich. If you can do all these other things, but you probably won't work out and you probably won't be able to get it done. So yeah, that's my view as well. Oh,
Realized I'm on mute there. Look, heavily resonate with that. And look, as promised, we will dive into the bulk of the show now. So, listeners, likes, retweets, follows, all the good stuff. We want to blow this one up. Already, literally thousands of you in here, which is really huge, especially with what we're talking about today. And to begin with, I really want to dive into like why current Web3 standards fall short, especially when it comes to mass adoption. And I think gaming and what you're building specifically on Somnia is like a great contextual point that we can build off here. So, Paul, for you, I think first question: how does our native terminology stop Web3 from scaling to the masses, and what needs to change?
this is this is great. I think it's actually really weird for me. So I come Web 2 industry for most of my career, then came to Web 3, and it is so odd how obsessed everyone is at pitching their technology as opposed to the value their technology gives. So in Web 2, you are told very early on the tech is cool, but ultimately, what is the value you're providing to the end user? And you pitch that as the thing, not the technology and the kind of specifics about the technology. And I think it goes back to the kind of level and maturity of the industry. We are just very immature. Loads of like really smart engineers have basically built this all up and have kind of taken their technical jargon and made it front and center of the whole industry. Um, and it was
Mm.
weird for me when I first started. I didn't want to engage with it because I was like, this doesn't make sense to me, but I've almost had to because that's the way things are currently done. That's how you build mindshare and that's how you build up market understanding. But I think ultimately, pretty much all of the technology terms need to disappear and just needs to go to end user terms. I think that my favorite one of this is NFT. NFT for me, that is a technical implementation detail of how the underlying technology works. Non-fungible token, ERC 721, that is like a technical detail. Ultimately, it's a digital good or a digital asset. That's the thing that people care about at the end of the day. The fact that it's using NFTs behind the scenes and that's become the thing is very weird for me as an engineer and me as a product person as well. Ultimately, it's like you now own this digital item and you can use it in these places. That's the thing that users care about. And I think almost these words have now become dangerous. Like I talk to the people in the games industry all the time and I tell them, oh, you could add tokens or NFTs, and they go off that. But if I talk about in-game monetization or in-game assets, they get that straight away. And if it so happens to be implemented on a blockchain with NFTs and tokens, that's not the massive thing for them. And so I think we need to get rid of most of the technical jargon, in fact, all of the technical jargon, and focus on what is the value for the end users and how that kind of creates value for them. So an example, I think wallets are a really interesting one as well. I quite like the idea of a wallet, but ultimately in Web2 world, you have an account. And if you just said sign in with Google and get your account rather than download this MetaMask thing, add this plugin to this browser and do all this stuff, I think people would understand that very intuitively. They just got an account and they had things in their account. Um, NFTs is the other one, tokens is another one. So I think basically we need to get rid of all of the jargon completely and just focus on what is the value for the end user. And then I don't know, I think as a space, it is fine for us to talk about the technology. And when we're talking to each other about this layer one, layer two, that kind of thing, that's fine. But when we're going out to market, you need to position for the market and for the end user and use words that they understand. And basically, that's no crypto words at the end of the day, is the most thing. I love this idea as well. We need to educate more people about the space. We need to teach them about all these kind of like weird things like bridging and gas and stuff like that. I'm like, no, we need to get all that stuff out of the way so end users don't even know they're using a blockchain. That is the real way the space scales. Again, I think this comes down to, it makes me realize how early we are in the space, because once we mature, these words won't be a thing anymore, and it'll just be apps which users go to, have fun, experiment with. That happens to be on top of a blockchain, but they don't even really know that. They don't need to know that. Like when you go to a website, you don't know if it's on AWS or Azure. It's exactly the same with blockchains at the end of the day. You're just going to have fun, have a good time, and own the items at the end of the day. So yeah, I think that's quite a take of all the terminology needs to go, unless we're talking to each other or talking to a very technical audience, in my view. Yeah.
Yeah, look, I'm dead with you here, and I almost set you up. I'm surprised you didn't say this word, because I set you up within the context of like what we're talking about today, which is why current Web3 standards fall short of mass adoption. Because I don't know about you, but how do you feel even about the term Web3 at this point?
So I use it a lot because you kind of have to.
Yeah.
I think ultimately it's just the internet. I think Web3 again is a technical term for investors and not an end user term. The fact that users are using Web3, Web2, Web1, I don't think 98, 99% of the people in the real world know. If I talk to my partner about this, she doesn't know that Facebook is Web2 and like reading a newspaper online is Web1. She doesn't know that. She just goes to internet sites and has fun. And when she plays games as well, I think this is the biggest one actually that I really get to. People always talking about Web3 gaming, and I'm just like, no, it's just fun video games that happen to use Web3 elements. Is this place we need to get to? Because ultimately, for me as an end user, I care a little bit the fact that it's on crypto rails, but it's not really what I care about. What I care about is the fact that I have a way to cash out my assets. I have a way to move my assets to other experiences. I have some understanding the game will last forever, even if the person behind it disappears. I have this ability to kind of gamble and wager on top of games. That's the things I care about as the end user, not the fact that it's using blockchain or Web3. So I kind of also would like us to get rid of Web3 games and just call them games, fun games with Web3 elements, Web3 mechanics. That's another thing that I go on about quite a bit. It's quite a step change, obviously, because we are very focused on like Web3 games, crypto, and that kind of thing. But it's a place we need to get to, because ultimately, good content with Web3 elements is going to be how we win across gaming, across every sector, basically. And that's where we need to get to.
Yeah, look, again, I'm with you. I go back and forth. So I think when the market is hot, and for example, I like when I say hot, I mean Bored Ape Yacht Club are 500,000 hot. You know, we haven't experienced this in years, but when it is incredibly hot, I think putting that keyword in front actually brings attention. People are trying to learn about this tech now because they're like, oh, there's either significant money going into it, or maybe it's because in the newer version, it's because a game is absolutely great and people are actually starting to ask why. And maybe the answer is because it's a Web3 enabled game, it's a crypto blockchain enabled game. And that's where I get stuck, because we're not in that moment right now. So I think actually when you say Web3 gaming at this moment in time, you're confusing half the audience that you want to reach,
Yeah.
because they don't know what Web3 is, even to the point to be curious about it. I think it's really a word that we describe ourselves at, but that the rest of the world don't actually understand that means blockchain or that means crypto. So yeah, I go back and forth. I don't know what the answer is. I prefer crypto gaming, but I know that has a negative connotation within the gaming space as well, whilst Web3 gaming doesn't as much.
Yeah, I think the problem with the word crypto is it's actually got, so you get downranked on search and downranked on Twitter, for instance, if you use the word crypto, but
Yeah.
Web3 is not a downranked word. So that's another thing. But Web3 gaming, I think crypto gaming, people would understand a lot more what that is rather than Web3 gaming. I don't think most people know what Web3 versus Web2 versus Web1 is. I think crypto, that's a much more understood word. Um, but I don't know the answer to this. I ultimately think, for me, the answer is it has to just be fun video games with crypto elements
Yes.
or Web3 elements, and that should be the focus at the end of the day. And it's the same across all applications. That's not just games. That's like social applications. It should be good social applications that use Web3 elements to make them better in some form. Any application, basically. But yeah, I do get what you mean in terms of it does have time periods where it becomes a marketing edge. Um, Similar
Yeah.
to metaverse was once like that as well. And there's all these words that come, and AI is currently the word. You've got to have AI in your product name somewhere because that gives you like massive jump in valuation. All these things are trends and fads at the end of the day, and you have to go for what is the long term value. Um, the other thing I'd say that you just kind of touched on a little bit, the Web 2 audience versus the Web 3 audience is incredibly interesting how you market to them very differently. We were going through this today with the team,
Yeah.
where so we're looking at our marketing spend, and at the moment it's very focused around the Web3 native audience and kind of bringing those into the ecosystem. And I sat there and I was looking at the spend, and I was like, but ultimately we need to get gamers from Web 2. So we need to start spending money to get them interested in the games in our ecosystem. And how do we kind of think about the money we spend on Web3 natives versus the money we spend on Web 2 consumers? And it's very similar, but very different things. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, you pay for a big streamer on Twitch, that will get you a load of Web 2 consumers, but probably won't get you any Web 3 consumers. Or you pay for a massive campaign with KOLs and crypto Twitter, you get a load of Web 3 users. So you have to think about the different channels and different ways you get to these people. And I think different words resonate with them. Like crypto and Web3 games works very well on crypto Twitter. If you did that on Twitch, in fact, there are some Twitch streamers that won't stream your game if you position it as a Web3 or crypto game. They just refuse to stream your game. So there's also that to think about too.
Yeah, that's it reminds me of that Mr. Beast game, or I don't know if you remember this, but it was like it was something to do with streaming, obviously, because it's Mr. Beast, and like gaming competition, and it had like a crypto component to it. It was like Web3 enabled. I think it was
Yeah.
actually some of the assets that were available were digital assets, but
Yeah.
it was very like non-extractive, and basically one gamer wasn't aware that it had anything to do with crypto and Web3, found out that there was just an attachment to it, blew up on the internet for like a month, completely like just persecuted anybody that hadn't told him that it was Web3 or crypto enabled. And I think they may have even just not went ahead with the launch. Like, it was kind of crazy. I'll have to
Wow,
look
I don't
back at
remember
the
that. That was back
context,
in
but
that was back last cycle, right? I kind of remember Mr. Beast doing quite a lot of stuff
yeah,
last cycle. Um,
it's like
it's got
a year and a half ago, it wasn't
oh
super
really?
long
It was
ago.
no, all right.
Yeah.
It is getting better though. I think Off the Grid
Mm.
was very interesting that they got a lot of the massive streamers, and they were actually really promoting blockchain and crypto. They were basically like, this is like Steam but outside of Steam, and I was like, that's a really good way to put what blockchain is. It basically gives you all of the functionality of Steam
Yes.
Marketplace and Steam Store, but not being on top of Steam, which then means obviously you as a creator don't have to pay the massive fees that Steam have. So it is getting better every single, I'd say every 6 months or 3 months, it gets better. People are warming up to it more and more over time. Yeah.
I think that you've just given me a follow up on this, where I think the equivalent product in Web 2 that we can point to and say, here's what specifically this is going to look like, but here's the issues with that current product that crypto solves, is a big thing. And
Yeah.
with you obviously really on like that campaign of like, look, here we are as Somnia, here's the solutions that we're providing, here's what the product is, and here's the value that this product provides. Do we need to relate our native processes more to ones in Web 2, like that example you've just given with, you know,
Oh.
Steam, and like here's our solution to it?
Yeah, so in some cases, yes. In fact, in a lot of cases, yes. I think so. If you take like Roblox, for instance, and you decentralize that, that's a better form of Roblox. Because the problem with Roblox today is it's centrally controlled. And it means that they can take very high fees. It means you as a creator have no control over your content. So if they change the rules, all of a sudden your game or experience completely breaks. And that's a very bad marketplace, in my view. So taking things that exist in Web 2 with their central control structures and making them decentralized, I think is a good way to pitch a product, to be like, we're taking this, moving this to Web 3, and here's the proposition for creators, here's the proposition for users. The thing that I really want to see more of, though, is like the new apps that have never been built before, that can only really be built because blockchain exists. We don't see many of these today. But I think there is a whole new set of applications that are based on these kind of financial rails that you couldn't ever build in Web 2, because of the control
Mm.
structures and because of the way they're formed, that are interesting. I just haven't seen many of those yet. I think prediction markets and this kind of gambling segment is probably the place where we'll see a lot of stuff come out, because ultimately it gives you really easy ways to transfer value across the world. That makes it very good for gambling and wager style mechanics. So I think there's going to be a lot of stuff in that kind of segment, which are like different apps that you just couldn't do in the Web 2 world because of rules and regulations and stuff like that. But yeah, so I think in general, yes, I'd say take what you have in Web 2, then add the Web 3 elements, which adds extra value propositions or extra value for the different audiences you have. But I really want to see the devs experiment with like completely new applications. And I think the barrier to that before has been infrastructure, and like blockchains being fast enough and the infrastructure being sufficiently good that you can build these high quality applications fully on chain. I think now with things like Somnia, you can actually do that, and that's why I'm really excited about. I'm really interested in this kind of next set of the industry.
Yeah, that again, like great example. And I think we need more Web 2 analogies. Like, I don't think necessarily needs to be like, look, here's the product and here's the fix of the product. But I have seen this even recently. Like, I'm again hopping back to NFTs because for some reason I still believe in them. And Doodles recently launched a token. And it was all this like abstract reason for the token was, look, media is going to be completely disrupted by AI. And our token is to make sure that comes into the creators' pockets, not just this like one monopoly thing like ChatGPT and OpenAI is for like just general large language model AI right now. Which I sort of get. I get enough of the context to be like, okay, that makes sense to me. But I could do with an analogy. Like, give me a Simpsons reference, give me like some sort of IP and why there's going to be so much more value coming from this here. And like for context to what you've just said about like having these native apps that just could not exist on a Web 2 rail, I think the example I would give is Uber. And I think Uber is a perfect example of a product that could not exist before the iPhone, and specifically before GPS enabled phones to be able to track, oh, okay, so here's the car and here's the human being to the basically precise point of where they are right now. Unicorn business then stems from that. And that to me is like when we're thinking about, okay, look, obviously we're not looking for Web3 Uber. That's not what I'm saying right now. But we are looking for a product that just could not exist before. And the best example that I can bring to mind is Uber. And I think those analogies really do help people like myself who are on Gigabrains. We're creating in the space. We love the space. Maybe we're like Bitcoin maxis, and you know, there's been something like maybe it's because for me, I was a gamer getting banned, like hard banned on Xbox and PlayStation because I wanted to trade FIFA
Yeah.
like players. Like that's literally, I made a living at 14 and 15 by like building up these players because I was actually all right at the game. But I would sell them on eBay, and I would even sell the coins on eBay. And they started hard banning my console because the hours and the skill set and everything that I built within that game, they were just like, yeah, but that's just against our terms and conditions, because that means we don't get every penny. You
Yep.
get like maybe a penny to our pound. So yeah, I don't know what you think about that, but do you ever think in terms of like, okay, this is what Somnia's building? What's the relative example in Web 2? Not that we're necessarily building the same thing in Web 3, but the analogy is going to maybe help an audience that we couldn't reach before because they just can't conceptualize what we're talking about right now.
Yeah. So you talking about with reference to Somnia or the applications? Because for me, Somnia basically is going to enable Web 2 quality applications in terms of the feel, in terms of the speed, in terms of the responsiveness, but with Web 3 properties.
Yeah.
So what I would say to an end consumer is you won't even know you're using Web3. And this is my point about this word will disappear because you'll be using blockchain behind the
Mm.
scenes. You'll be in a game trading with someone, buying stuff from a marketplace that will be backed by blockchain, but you won't even know it's backed by blockchain, and neither should you. So I think what I would say in terms of the end user is you will be on blockchain rails, but you won't even know you're on blockchain rails. And that will be all of the applications on Somnia at the end of the day. That's what we're aiming for. That goes across every sector. So games, you'll be buying stuff in items, you'll be trading with people, but that'll be using blockchain, you won't even know. With decentralized finance, with DEXs and things like that, you'll be buying and selling tokens, buying and selling NFTs, and it'll be instant. You won't even know, you won't have any kind of wallets or connection or loading times. That will be all instantaneous. For AI, I think is slightly different. That's all generative AI that kind of sits on the side. For SocialFi, you'll be using all the social applications, putting posts, sharing with people, clicking like. That will be using blockchain behind the scenes, but you won't even know it's using blockchain. So I think that's the real proposition. It's about taking applications that lived in Web 2 land, moving into Web 3, but giving equivalent user experience and then extra value propositions on top. That's what I would always say in terms of what Somnia is really bringing to the table and what the difference is.
No, that's interesting because I think the difference between Somnia and like basically onboarding games that can, build in a way that not only could they not build in Web 2, but also just couldn't even build it in Web 3. Like the transaction cost is going to be too high, the speed is going to be too slow, like all of these things. It does make me curious about how are we pitching that to the gamer? Is that like even Somnia's role to pitch the value proposition within the game? Because you're onboarding the games. So do you see yourself more, does it go that deep for Somnia and what you're building, or is really who you're marketing to the app builders, the game builders, the developer side?
Interesting question. So we are planning to market to both. A lot of people in the industry debate this. They're like, do blockchains sell to developers or do blockchains sell to consumers? The natural inclination is you just sell to developers and do a very focused developer go to market, and you kind of leave it up to them to go get the end users. That I think intuitively makes sense, but I've built platform technologies twice now. This is my third kind of platform product, which is a blockchain. And what you find is there are a lot of really creative people who are really good at building the end user application, but are not necessarily good at the business side. So what I call user acquisition, go to market, those kind of elements. And if you as an ecosystem can build up those go to market tools for those applications, it makes them super easy. So we are going to be trying to pull in a lot of Web2 consumers into the ecosystem and get them interested in using the applications. And that then becomes a value proposition in and of itself. It's like, come to Somnia, we have over 10 million players that we can point towards your game. And that for me is a very important part, which more chains should invest more in my view. They kind of think about themselves as technology. What I try and think about ourselves holistically is almost like a game publisher, where players are a very important component of that. And then cross pollination across the ecosystem is a very important part of that as well. So we will be doing both. And I think in order to maximize probability of success, you need to do both. Where you put the spend is a very interesting one, though, about do you spend more on developers? Do you spend more on consumers? And also, it's a bit chicken and egg. You need to have content to start. So I think we've solved step one where we got a bunch of good games. Now bring in the consumers and then continue to grow out the content. That's the important part for me. So yeah, I kind of think about both, and I think more chains should think about both because I think ultimately having eyeballs is a very important proposition for game developers. Game developers have two problems. One is they can't find eyeballs for their game. The second is need money to build their game. Money comes in the form of people, technology, tools, and then cold hard cash. And if you can solve the eyeballs problem, that's huge for them.
Yeah, because look, hopping all the way back to the cold open here when we were talking about, like some of the news items within the crypto space more broadly, this is what I am noticing more and more about the space is that the guys who can bring the attention and can focus on the end consumer, as in the gamer, in your perspective, like they're not always the guys who are actually building for the long term. They're normally the people who can bring attention because actually they don't care about what they're actually going to
Yeah.
deliver on. They need the eyes right now. So that's why I asked you that question, is because I know you're bringing real games because you guys have that experience, that knowledge, and also you've demoed a couple of them on shows before. So like we know they're at alpha. Sometimes they're even launched. They're in beta, but I get concerned for these games because the guys actually building can't always actually do the content side and bring in the attention. So I agree. I think I'm not sure it's your obligation as a platform as like to bring in those gamers. Like really, the game should be drawing those in, but any support that you can give those games, because there's just been so many moments where, unfortunately, if you don't, then some other game might get the attention, and it's usually not because of what they've delivered, but just because they are better at bringing in
Hype.
attention.
Yeah. The
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
one of the biggest issues in the games industry at the moment is cost of acquisition. So the amount of dollars you have to spend to get a player to install and play your game is now got to silly levels, basically, where it is unviable to make so many video games now because cost of acquisition is so high, because streamers got so expensive, ads are ridiculous, all the different mechanisms basically have got so expensive. And so I think the solution is building up player bases and ecosystems and then repopulating them across the games in those ecosystems. That's the only way I can think of to solve this problem. The other way, actually, that's working quite well is giveaways, which Web3 is quite good at because it creates assets with actual tangible value, and then you can give those away.
yeah.
That's why I talk to game developers. That's a massive conversion way I convert people over. I'm like, how are you going to attract players? And they talk about giveaways. I'm like, what if you can make giveaways that are much more cost effective? And they're like, oh, that's interesting. I haven't thought about that. Okay, cool.
Nice, nice. Yeah. Again, we're great at that. We're very good at like bringing in for the attention. I think then it becomes a question of
Do you have
why
good
is
quality
the gamer
products?
there?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Like, you can bring them in, can you keep them? And that's exactly what you've just said. Like, do you have the quality product that's going to keep them? Look, I think really, really enjoying this conversation and sort of the organic way it's evolving. But I did also have another thing that I really want to talk about today, which is the testnet, because it's been live since February now. So
Yep.
I think before we go into any of the particulars, can you just give me a little bit of the experience so far? Like, is there anything just immediately when I say, "Hey, Paul, Somnia testnet," that your brain is just like, "Yeah, Jack, this thing I would really like to touch on." Experience, what you've learned, anything.
Yeah. So I think overall the test net's gone better than we expected. It's because we
Nice.
launched our public dev net back in November. So we've been very public with the project very early compared to other teams, and that's battle tested us. But I think the biggest thing that we found that always comes up to my head is the blockchain is solid, super fast, super slick. The problem is all of the bits around the blockchain are not fast enough to support the blockchain of our scale and magnitude. So you have things like wallets, like traditional wallet infrastructure
Yeah.
today. If you try and use MetaMask on our apps, it takes more time for the wallet to load than it does for the app to do the thing on the blockchain. That's getting better now with embedded wallets like Privy, like Sequence, like ThirdWeb. But I think all teams need to start using those rather than the traditional wallets. Indexes, so these are things that index the blockchain that allows the app to read them. They're not fast enough, they can't keep up. So basically, the problem we've had is like the infrastructure around the blockchain not being fast enough. That we've been leveling up with the teams and with partners to get to a place that you can support blockchain of our scale. But that was something that I don't think we expected would be a problem. I thought the Web 2 parts would be super fast and super fine, but turns out the Web 2 parts weren't fast enough for the Web 3 part, which is very counterintuitive and very abnormal. So I think that's probably the biggest thing. The other thing that's been really interesting is watching the project become more decentralized. And so you hear this word all the time, but now kind of living it, going from like us as a team building it to now multiple teams building different parts, having like over 50 people running the infrastructure all across the globe, coordinating all of that has been, it's so interesting how that is working, but just kind of like it is just working even though it's not being kind of like controlled by one party telling everyone what to do, because all these people know their job and are doing their job really well. And I've been very pleasantly surprised by that. I was honestly terrified about that. I was like, oh my god, everything's going to break. But I think there's a lot of really high quality professionals behind the scenes that are running the infrastructure that really know what they're doing and know how to run blockchains. And so that's been a very interesting journey, but a very pleasant journey so far. Um, let's see how that scales out when we get to like hundreds plus. But yeah, I think for me, the infrastructure part and the decentralized, those are the two most interesting parts of the project that I've really learned a lot from.
Yeah, honestly, it's weird for me to hear you use terms like terrified of, because you seem so like not phased by this sort of stuff. And honestly, also the execution of Somnia, I just I see you almost, and please don't take offense to this. You're like absolutely free to, of course. Like I can't control that, but like almost inhuman in like when you get to a certain level as a builder, like really executing in terms of the top 1%, that to me just equates to a different breed like of person. Like you just can't, like you can't possibly go through what I go through in terms of like just be nervous about like a launch or a new show or a new product or whatever. Like there must be a level of, I don't know, like your brain just doesn't get hit as hard. It's almost like a pain threshold, but a fear threshold. Do you feel that? Do you feel like being in the space, launching what you've launched, the experience that you have? Do you feel like you have a normal level, like just everybody else, of like being concerned or fearful about launches or products, or do you feel like you have a bit of a superpower in that world?
So so it's very weird because my instinct would be like, no, I'm a human. I have exactly the same. I feel exactly the same as everyone else,
Yeah.
but it isn't true. When I go into the real world and see people get incredibly stressed about things, I just sit there and be like, well, you just got to get on with it. Like, it doesn't really matter. I start to realize that over time, by doing startups for the last 14 years, doing Web3, you basically go through all of these high stress, high pressure scenarios so many times, and it forms you as a person that you just become like super resilient. That the when it gets to higher stakes, it still phases you, but you are incredibly resilient compared to what most people would consider. And I realize that when I go through normal life and I'm sitting there like these things that people were like, "How are you dealing with that?" I'm just like, I just kind of get on with it and kind of do it, kind of thing. So my instinct would be no. I feel fear. I get stressed like everyone else. I wake up in the middle of the night being like, "Holy shit, what's going on?" But I think it does make you a lot more resilient, and that's how you deal with the pain threshold. I think because you get put through it over and over again, and your body and brain just start to adapt. Um, I do
Yeah.
worry though. My wife always jokes about one day you're going to explode, Paul, and I'm like, maybe I am. I don't know, but I've got this far, so let's see how we go.
Yeah, as long as Somni is done by then, like on my head be it. But now look, I love that take. That's the transparency there. Is there is there anything you do to deal with this though? Like outside of just having been battle tested, is there anything that like you've learned on like a personal level? Like we've all seen the morning routine shit that's in the internet at this point, ice baths. I'm bathing in like incredibly cold water of the morning and then journaling for 7 hours of my day before I then, go and drink 14 liters of water to make sure I'm effectively hydrated, all that. Is there any genuine stuff where you have just noticed, look, it does get stressful. Here's like something I do personally that I feel just sets me up right for the day? Or is it purely just battle hardened? Like it's just no, Jack, I have literally just been doing this for so long right now. My level of peak, like, oh, this thing is stressful, the bar's just lower because I've been so much further and so much higher before.
Yeah, so I have gone through a massive like genesis of these things through my life. I've been into like self improvement ever since I was pretty young, and I had insane morning routines like you're kind of talking about, and insane evening wind down routines that you would joke at, and I kind of realized that it was a waste of time. It's not a waste of time. there is an 80-20 basically. And what I've learned over the years is what is that 20 that gives you 80% of results. So for me, it is exercise. So I exercise first thing in the morning, get enough sleep. If your sleep gets compromised, you're screwed. Have a diet that's decent. I eat like a saint, to be clear. That helps probably a lot. Meditation is quite useful and journaling is quite useful, but you don't need to do them, but those two are quite useful as well. So I think doing that as a core is pretty much how I deal with most of this stuff. And then the other thing I do is I remove complexity from the rest of my life as much as possible. I think ultimately I kind of see life like imagine it's like a set of gas burners where you can turn each bit up and down. And if you're fully burning the gas on your work burner, you can't be fully burning the gas on everything else. You have to simplify everything else. So, an example, my personal finances, I own I still own a lot of crypto actually, interestingly, but I would consider it very bland compared to what a lot of people probably do in the space, and that's because I don't have the time
Mm.
or the mental capacity to actually focus on it and do it well. So I just simplify all of these other elements, and that I think is very important as well to make sure that if you are deciding to focus on this thing, you're not adding loads of stressors in other parts of your life because that will blow you up quite quickly. I think. So yeah, there's a simple set of stuff: exercise, healthy diet, sleep, and then there is decomplexifying the rest of your life. That's what I would say. I think as well, I find the thing that helps me de-stress most is to do the work. I often find stress is a function of you
Mm.
being worried about some piece of work or something needs to get done. And if you just get enough done in a day, you stop feeling stressed because you're like, I did what I needed to do today. I got enough done today. And that helps you sleep better as well. But yeah, that's what I say.
Yeah, I resonate heavily with that. I'm sure a lot of the audience do as well. And look, audience, by the way, thank you so much for tuning in. Like, we're coming into like the final segment of the show, but there's like over 3,500 of you who've joined so far, which is just crazy numbers. But doesn't mean there's not more of you out there needing to listen to this show. So do get the likes, the retweets out if you've enjoyed this content. Just gives us a sign that you want to see more of it. So likes, retweets, follows, they're the free easiest ways to support, and they're also free, as in FREE, not THREE. I nearly spaced on how to spell both of those things there, Paul. This is what I mean about you having a different threshold of fear, because my anxiety just hit peak by not knowing how to spell free live on a show. Look, let's get back to the testnet a little bit, because I fundamentally diet. Look, what you've just said, everybody probably knows, even to the point where you mentioned, look, just doing the thing gets rid of a lot of the stress, because the stress actually comes from thinking about doing the thing and not doing the thing. I might have to clip that for myself and just rewatch it every couple of days when the anxiety peaks. But I really do love just how much that resonated with me. Talking about the testnet though, are there any particular things that you and the team have been looking out for during this phase? Like, is there any data that you really wanted to get? Is there any outcomes that you really wanted to see to be like, look, this is working, or this isn't working, this is something we need to fix?
There's loads. I think for us, it has been about two things. It's stress testing the system to like push it to maximal capacity or high levels of capacity with real end user applications. I think Chunked, which people in the community or in the audience would have seen, it's basically a fully on-chain version of Minecraft. When I say fully on-chain, I mean there is no server. Every time you move a player, all the position updates on chain. Every time you mine a block, that is on chain. Every time you craft an item, that is on chain. It is fully on chain. There is no game server. That did 250 million transactions over a weekend. So a lot of transactions very, very quickly, and was a very, very good stress test of the system and kind of flushed out bugs and issues and problems. And so doing those kind of processes and practices with end users has been incredibly useful. It also helps us from an operations perspective of how you run a blockchain with all the validators and all those kind of different components. That's been a big learning for us that we've been kind of getting through as we've been going through the testnet. I think the other one is getting a lot better at working with the community. I think before testnet, we had a community, we were engaging with them, but now I would consider the community part of the project. So we often will get feedback from them, listen to what they're saying, and kind of help incorporate that into our go-to-market motion in terms of our product. And that's been really good. And we're actually now lining up a lot more stuff to start adding. I call it decentralized governance, but it's not that. It's basically just involving the community in the decision-making process of the project. And I've really enjoyed that process and practice and think it's been really good. I think the other thing in terms of data has been users and usage to validate, do people want to use these applications that we're kind of building out with people in the ecosystem, and are people interested in that? And that's been another thing that's been very, very valuable for us. More applications are coming, and so we're going to test that more and more. But that's also been very eye-opening to see which ones really work, resonate with users, and which ones are a bit more like, nah, not so good. Maybe we won't do much of that. So that's been another thing as well. I think ultimately it's the thing I tell all startup founders. It's just like, get your product out there. You will learn 1,000 times more from your product being in consumers' hands and them using it and them shouting at you and telling you what's wrong, than you kind of sitting there in your room thinking about what users will think about your product. I did this myself for my first product. Spent 3 years building it. Thought it was the best thing ever. Took it to market. No one wanted it, and I was like, well, probably wasted those 3 years there. I was could have just done a very small MVP, got that out there, and realized very quickly, this wasn't the right product to build. But yeah.
Yeah, that's the Lean Startup. If you haven't read that book, like, it's very,
Yeah, of
very
course.
similar sort of takes from the author. And yeah, look, one thing just top of mind, like, we need to have a look at this, because I have seen it even in our comments today. Like, a massive shout out to all the guys in the comments. That also, by the way, really helps the algo, like, see that the show is out there. So really, even if it's just a GM, post it. But if there's any questions you guys have, I have been keeping a track of it. So we will, like, look at that to formulate other shows. If the same question keeps coming up from an audience member or multiple audience members, we know we probably need to address that, and that's something that people want to hear. But this chunk, this has come up multiple times, like people just being like, get chunked, like it's literally, it's in the channel. I absolutely love that. Did not realize like how much stress that had put on Somnia so far, but also how successful it already is. We definitely need to demo this. Like, we
You,
definitely need to, like, talk about
I,
this.
I wish I had the picture. So we did like a quest where people had to mine the world. Literally, the world got
Yeah.
leveled. It like got completely ransacked and destroyed. And just
No.
watching. So the first week we did like these creative things where like go build some cool stuff, post it on Twitter, and there's all these cool like monuments and structures and like logos of different projects and stuff. And I was like, this is really cool looking. And then over 3 days we did this quest, and literally the world has been leveled, and it's just like this dark grey blob now, and it's like, oh, this is what happened. Show me the incentives, I'll show you the outcome. But it was really good to see, because it really stress tested the system. We're working on version 2 now, should be out in a few weeks, which will have a lot more features and a lot more cool stuff going on. But yeah, it really is cool to see the community kind of getting behind that project, and what happens when you kind of get a community to do stuff together. It's been very cool.
That's hilarious, like that it just got leveled, and yeah, you had all this like cool stuff, and now it's just a grey blob. I cannot wait for version 2. Definitely want to talk about that on the show. And yeah, next time let's get the visuals. Let's see this thing get turned into a blob again. But absolutely love this. I think final question for me, because we are getting really close to time, is just a very quick fire one, which is Somnia. It's hard for me. I speak with you on like a semi-weekly basis at this point. Because of that, I'm more interested in Somnia, so I am following you the accounts, which means, the algo eventually realizes that, and it surfaces me more of that
Yeah.
content. But even so, even though my algorithm is now a little bit more biased to Somnia, because I like the data and I like the information it's given me, definitely it has blown up recently. I am seeing bigger creators talk about it. I'm seeing it constantly referenced on the timeline. I'm seeing people really love what you've built. Is there any like one single thing that you are most excited about to come out in the next 2 to 4 weeks for that audience that now are like, they are aware, like hyper aware of Somnia, and I'm sure they'd love like any alpha, any TLDRs you can give them before we close out?
So what I would say in the next few weeks is there are some of the big games we've announced will be dropping. So you'll be getting to play those, which I'm very excited about personally. I'm slightly worried that I'm not going to have enough time to play the games and do my
Actually
job,
play
but
them.
we'll see what we do there. And then I think I can't say anything about the other stuff, but there are some very big partnerships and new games we've signed, which will be announced in the next kind of like 4 to 6 weeks. So I definitely stay tuned for those. We also have a lot more stuff we're doing on the kind of social side. So you would have seen us doing stuff with Kaito, with Yappers. We have a lot more stuff
Yes.
coming there, because I think we've realized that SocialFire and InfoFire now a piece of a project in and of itself that you have to like gamify and work with creators, and it's just a really fun way to get creators interested in your project and involved with your project. And so we're investing quite heavily there as well. So you'll see us doing a lot more drops and stuff about that. We've got some interesting things planned that are quite different to other teams. It's not just like more cash; it is more interesting ways you can get involved with the ecosystem. Let's put it that way.
Love it, dude. And yeah, I'm realizing as I'm seeing these yaps build up, and Kaito, by the way, doing like a great freaking job in terms of value they're bringing back in for that engagement. Why am I not doing more content for Somnia at this point? Like I get the like I'm literally here for an hour. Like I can clip it, I can TLDR it. I literally have that advantage. I'm just like, fuck, like I should be doing way more stuff. This is like such an obvious play for me. But look, absolutely love it. Loved all the conversation and the takes today, man. Thank you again for all your time. I will say, and the team can, they can email me directly about any thoughts that they have or any complaints they have about this take. Playing the games is your job, Paul.
I know.
Just putting that out there.
I know.
Like,
I playtest.
therefore,
Literally, I've got about 7 hours of playtest this week, so I know it's part of my job. It's just balancing that because there's just so many games coming out. I don't know. I'm going to spend the time.
Yeah, I was trying to give you an out there and thinking, hey, if I say this and then you're like, sorry, Jack has told me that it's part of my job, so I'm going to spend more time gaming this week. But yeah, it sounds like you guys already thought about that.
If I stream it to Twitter and Twitch, that is definitely, it's promotion, right? That's definitely it.
Definitely. I will jump on that stream as well, dude. If you wanna hop on, I'll ask you questions like during it, then you pop me a DM. Yeah. Yeah. Right, guys. Look, massive shout out to you, to the team. Can't wait to see these games in a couple of weeks as well. Massive shout out to the audience as well. Like, these shows are just growing. Obviously, the attention is coming for Somnia now, so that's not a surprise. But also, I'm seeing the same people just consistently engage with the show. So massive shout out to all the audience. Anyone who's liked, retweeted, commented, like, we see you and we appreciate you so damn much. But that is unfortunately all we have time for today. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we will catch you on the next one.
Cheers. Thanks, Rex.